All right, so today I want to talk about the singularity. This is a cool sort of concept that I learned about around 2013 or so still when I read Ray Kurzweil's book called The Singularity Is Near. So in case you're unfamiliar with the concept, the singularity is basically a point in time where technology is advancing so quickly that you just can't predict what's going to happen basically. It's like an event horizon sort of situation. So if you look at the rate of technological progress over the course of human history, you'll see that it's operating on an exponential curve, right? And this is quite difficult for humans to understand because typically humans think in linear terms, right? In linear progress. And when you zoom in on the exponential curve, a lot of it does feel linear, right? And I mean, you don't have to go back that far either still, just go back a few, I don't know, let's say 500 or 600 years or so, right? Where, let's say you lived on a farm and you'd be using the same tools that your grandfather and your father used to work the land, and then your kids and grandkids would use the same tools to work the land, right? There wouldn't really be much difference over 5 generations, let's say. Now, what's interesting is that the times that we're living in are kind of unlike at any other point in history, because that exponential curve is kind of shaped like a hockey stick, right? So where it's going very slowly sort of up, and then it hits this point where it starts to curve, and then it basically goes vertical, right? And right now we are on the curve and getting ready to go vertical, right? Now when I was born, there was a bunch of stuff that didn't exist, right? Like personal computers were barely a thing. The internet was not a thing really. Mobile phones were still the size of, cinder blocks, right? So, and people listened to records and cassettes, right? It wasn't even really CDs at that point. So from the time that I've been born until now, you've seen an insane amount of technological progress. Now we have AI powered fighter jets and, space stations and all kinds of crazy stuff. Okay. So this rate of change is obviously going to continue to speed up, right? Because technological progress compounds, right? We all know the magic of compound interest, right? Progress works the same way still. One technological breakthrough provides the framework for the next one, and so on and so forth, right? If you've ever played the game Civilization, you'll know what I'm talking about when you see the technology tree, right? You need to unlock certain technologies before you can get the next one, right? Now, this happens faster and faster. Now that we've hit this point now, over the past little while where AI has gotten so good at so many things, including research, coding, and all kinds of, I'd say research and coding are the two most important ones in terms of advancing technological progress. Research for obvious reasons, and coding, you would be surprised how much of the world relies on software. Everything, right? There's who is it said that software is eating the world? It was Ben Horowitz or something, or Mark Andreessen, one of those two guys. And that's absolutely true. And software has eaten the world. And now AI is eating software. And everything else along with it, right? So with that new increase in speed, we're gonna get a bunch more breakthroughs, and we are already still. It's literally happening as we speak. And it will compound and compound and compound. Now, the previous estimates for when the singularity would take place, people kind of accepted sort of the one that Ray Kurzweil put in his book, which was around 2045. I'm not so sure that we're going to have to wait that long anymore. And again, because Now, we are kind of on track for his predictions, and his predictions have been on point. You know, he has a really good track record because he's kind of been doing this for a long time. But I think it's going to happen faster. I think we're just about there, maybe 5 years, maybe, you know, give or take. Though we also don't know exactly how this is going to play out in terms of, like, you know, what does the public get to see, right? Does the singularity, is that going to be evenly distributed, right? There's another quote that comes to mind. It says, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed, right? And I mean, we could see that if you go back to like mid-90s when the internet started becoming like a thing, right? You know, it took like 10 plus years, I'd say, before it started making it to the rest of the world, you know, en masse, right? I think in 1995, 1996, when we first got, you know, a decent computer and the internet hooked up in our house, I mean, that was still pretty rare then, like globally, right? And Canada had pretty high internet adoption off the bat, but yeah, it took a while for that to be disseminated throughout the rest of the world. So you're probably going to see the same sort of thing, right? Where, you know, there's probably going to be a delay between sort of some of these technologies. And I think I've said in a previous video when we were talking about the difference between AGI and ASI. So AGI being artificial general intelligence, and I'd say we're basically here already. And then ASI, so artificial superintelligence. Now, I don't think artificial superintelligence is going to be in the public, going to be accessible in the public, unless like something dramatic happens. I think that's going to be behind closed doors because, frankly, the people who create that are going to think it's too dangerous to give like average Joe access to it, more or less, right? Now, you could say that if everyone has the same thing, then there's no advantage. But I mean, you know, governments and big corporations, they want that advantage, right? So they will probably do whatever they can to keep that advantage as long as possible. And artificial superintelligence as an advantage is pretty fucking big, you know, if you think about it. One way I've used to explain sort of the difference, right? So AGI, let's say you'd have let's say you're trying to make like a movie or a video game or something, right? So with AGI, you could like tell it what you want it to do, then it would do some of it, and then you would like critique it or, you know, give it further instructions, and then it would, you know, do its revisions, and you'd maybe go through that process a few times, and then you'd sort of get the thing that you want, right? Whereas with ASI, you would like tell it the thing that you want, and then it would like give you back something better, like instantly, like without you having to do any revisions, and you'd just be blown away, more or less, right? That's kind of a loose sort of way of explaining it, you know, right? So yeah, singularity. So what kind of things are going to be happening with that? Now, this is where it gets kind of crazy. So if you look at the human body is like both pretty like amazing in terms of its robustness, but also like pretty fragile at the same time. Like we could take a beating and keep on ticking in a lot of ways, but also like, you know, there are some real inefficiencies in the design, so to speak, right? Like, you know, we can't like, I gotta breathe all the time, right? You know, whereas like if we like, what was it? There was a thing in his book where it's like if you added like silver nitrite or something, or I can't remember what the exact material was. I think it was silver something. If you added something like that into the bloodstream, you could like only breathe like once every 4 minutes or something, right? You know, and that's just tip of the iceberg, man. When you get into stuff like nanobots that would be like living inside your body, like correcting things, and you know, it would make like genetic engineering look like child's play, basically, right? And I mean, like, you know, genetic engineering could also get a lot more visible and impactful and fast and efficient, and, you know, all that stuff, right? Like, again, making CRISPR look like a child's toy, right? That's the sort of stuff that we're headed towards, right? Now, is that something that they want everybody to have, or do they want to have advantages, right? You know, it's kind of funny. It's like with all of this stuff that happens, all these technological advances, we're basically going to see superheroes, more or less, right? You know, that's a thing that's going to happen. And again, because of the disparity of access, you know, as long as we continue to live in a society where, you know, financial means are the barrier of entry for stuff in general, right? Including, like, you know, these like physical, you know, technological enhancements that you would do to yourself. You know, this is not going to be covered by by your national healthcare service, you know, or your Medicare or whatever, right? Like, then you're going to see a big gap, like, and it's not going to be a wealth gap anymore. It's going to be like a physical ability gap, right? So, I mean, what happens then, right? And this is the whole point when they say, like, the singularity is that sort of event horizon where you can't see what happens next, right? You know, there's only so much technology that we can predict. There's only so much, like, you know, societal sort of changes that we can predict, at which, you know, but it's going to get to the point where we just don't know, right? Can't see what's coming down the pipeline anymore. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be wild. It's going to go better for some people than others. You know, just the same way that life has, you know, since the dawn of time, more or less, right? You know, there have been, you know, quote unquote winners and losers, let's say. Yeah, that's probably not going to change. I know that there's some people who are talking about, like, post-labor economics, you know, with the AI and the robots coming in, and, oh, everybody doesn't have to work, we can all do whatever we want and get everything we want, and we'll live in luxury space communism or whatever. I do not see that happening. No. Maybe for like a percentage of people they'll get that, but I don't think everybody's getting that still. You know, I go into sort of more detail on this topic in another video about, like, the concept of, like, you know, private robot armies and you know, stuff like that, which is again kind of a side note for all of this stuff, you know, because we're talking about, like, this balance between sort of, like, what is society doing, what is technology doing, what are nation states doing, what's the environment doing too? I mean, like, you know, be having all this crazy weather and stuff, right? If you have the technology to make weather irrelevant to you, but the other guy doesn't, you know, it's like you're protected from floods, droughts, you know, earthquakes, whatever, right? But the other guy isn't. Again, advantage, right? So it's like, who gets the technological advantages from the singularity? How are they going to be dispersed? What does that all look like, right? And these are questions that we don't know at this point. So we can speculate, we can guess, but frankly, like, I think most of the world is ill-equipped for this, because most of the world hasn't thought about this, right? I don't know how many people have actually read, like, Ray Kurzweil's books, or even, like, familiar with the concept of the singularity. I don't think it's that many, frankly. And I mean, forget about the singularity. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the congressional hearings they had in America with, like, the tech leaders, right? Where, like, you have, like, congressmen and senators, like, literally asking, like, Mark Zuckerberg how the internet works, because they don't know. Like, and if you don't know how something basic like the internet works, like, dude, like, what hope do you possibly have of, like, understanding, like, you know, nanobots and genetic engineering and you know, advanced artificial intelligence and, you know, advanced robotics and stuff, right? I mean, the internet is actually pretty simple. It's pretty old technology at this point too, right? But most people don't know. they just turn on their phone and magic happens, right? So there's not really many people who are well suited to understand and tackle these problems and, actually go into positions of leadership, whether it be in business or government, and take appropriate action to try and get the best outcomes for everyone, right? And we see this over and over and over again, right? It seems like we always just kind of like, we're bumbling around in the dark. It does always kind of sort of seem to work out though. So I'm not super worried. Like, I don't necessarily think that it's just gonna get into like some catastrophe Armageddon. Like, I think people will start to learn faster. And this is one of the things that AI helps with too, is that, it speeds up the learning process, right? Makes education a lot more accessible, and it's really good at like breaking down complex topics and helping people understand them in simple terms, in a language that they can understand, whether it's like their actual language or just sort of like the vocabulary that's being used, the analogies that are being used, like the examples that are being used for the education process. So yeah, I'm excited. I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be a bit, a little touch and go sometimes, a little edgy. There are going to be winners and losers. I think that there's going to be more winners than losers, frankly. But that remains to be seen still. And I think a big part of that is going to be, again, education. And getting the right people to understand the right technologies at the right time. And to be able to make better decisions from positions of leadership in business and government, right? So, yeah, singularity is coming. AI is speeding it up. And there's nothing you can do to stop it. All right, we're going to shut her off there. We'll see you in the next one.